shared principles. Ethnicity really is this kind of collective ancestry. So we're going to be biological or traditional or what have you, just a collective ancestry of sorts. But we have this term nation state. So this idea that states are composed of a nation, not nations. So we kind of already have this predilection for one state, one nation. And this goes back, it goes back a long way. It's reinforced by Woodrow Wilson in his 14 Points of Light after World War I. And you can have, ethnicity and nation should be thought of in these, distinct ways, but they can overlap as well, right? Or they cannot overlap. You can have a bunch of different ethnic groups within a nation, or you can have a nation of just one ethnic group, right? You can have states with more than one nation, nations without states, supranationalism. About 30% of countries in the world have one predominant ethnic group of 80% or more. So that's just 30% of countries have one dominant ethnic group of 80% or more. Can you guys think, states with more than one nation, there's lots of them. What are some examples? Canada? Yeah, absolutely. Bosnia? U.S.? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah. China? Absolutely. There's a lot of tension in a lot of those places, right? Certainly Tibet in China, but also Uyghurs in China, so in Xinjiang province, which is, I'm probably totally mispronouncing that, but it's out in the northwest. There's a lot of unrest there as well. Yeah, absolutely. Russia, yeah, so lots of them. How about a nation without a state? Any examples? Yeah.
Kurds?
The Kurds, absolutely. Actually, I think I've got a map. There we go. Kurds, a nation without a state. Probably never going to get one. For a number of reasons. Now look where they are, right? So Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, a little bit in Armenia. And I believe there's around 25 million Kurds. So it is a large nation without a state. And if you think about how small others, there's so many states with, under 10 million people, right? I think, well, okay, now I won't start doing it, but yeah, lots of states with under 10 million, yeah. Yes. There's different levels of relative autonomy for Kurdish peoples. So certainly in Iraq, their relative autonomy has been advanced since the demise of Saddam Hussein. And it's intriguing too when you look at these different areas, what, the goal, let's say, of Kurdistan, and how it's approached in different places reflects kind of the political situation in each one. For example, in Turkey, this is where you've had the most terrorist attacks by Kurdish groups. And this happens because Turkey is, of course, the most democratic of all of those states. So the theory, so it's an excellent example for kind of testing, are democracies kind of more prone to terrorism? Well, in the case of the Kurds and Turkey, it is, and many argue because, a lot of factors, but mostly because, in Turkey then you have a media that actually covers this. It's not shoved under the carpet. It's publicized. So it might affect actually voters and what they say or do, which might affect politicians and what they say or do with Kurds, etc. So that's that case. Iraq, of course, we know of the gas attacks that Saddam undertook against Kurdish peoples. Actually, he did this after the U.S. said, listen, by George Bush Sr., after he promised the Kurds, he said, you know what, if you guys rise up, we'll support you, we'll help you. Except they did rise up, the West didn't come, and Saddam gassed them, right? So, it can be very pernicious, this promise of help. As we talked about in the Hungarian case. I think you talked about that in this class. Okay, maybe not. I don't want to confuse you. Yeah.
The Romani or...
Oh, Roma. Yes, absolutely. Roma people, nation without a state. That's an excellent example. So, yeah, I think, and guys, think some more. There's lots. Okay. I like Hobsbawm. Now, you guys read Hobsbawm? What did you think? Yeah? Pretty, no, okay, now you're laughing. No, I want to know what you guys think of the readings. I won't, okay. I'll ask in a more not so direct way. Another time. Maybe I should do a little survey at the end. I always ask what you guys liked and didn't like, what you changed or what have you, because I like changing my syllabi, readings, etc. Yeah.
I thought it was so dry, it's desert.
Oh, ouch. Good thing I'm not Hobsbawm.
I agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Is that seconded by a lot of people?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Read it and read it and reread it. He's brilliant. Okay.
I thought it was more of a around the world accounting of how different countries not develop nationalism more than anything.
Okay, and so I think there's some good points there to keep in mind. Things like, education in native language and with the fight, the great fight for nationalism, 1848, and those revolutions, and what that meant for the nation state, the spread of literacy, the spread of the middle class, all these things have their interconnected. The opportunity then for people to gain professional positions, which fused with nationalism and creating your nation states, greater mobility, breakdown of localized tradition. I think that those are all pretty important things. This kind of intensification of nationalism, spread from Greece to other places in the Balkans, etc. For example, again, the Spring of Nations in 1848. This kind of social, economic, liberal calls infused with nationalism. So I think, but I get your point. Definitely. And this kind of scholarly literature often runs in a dry, Sahara desert kind of direction. But, some insights there, for sure. And some different ways perhaps to think of why we have nationalism today. That it's not this kind of inborn, oftentimes, we describe nationalism and ethnicity in the same sentence, and we have this idea of these flaming fires of national ethnic hatred, right? That it's kind of anciently driven, etc. But it's not. Actually, we'll probably talk about some of the, yes, there we go, primordialist. That is the primordialist perspective, is this ancient ethnic hatreds idea. this idea of centuries of feud, and that it's kind of inborn. And, I liked Hobsbawm because he just kind of dryly tells you, no, it's not all this, this crazy, psychosis of a people that's lasted for centuries. It's actually just like pedantic little moves, like, things that happen along the way that kind of brought us to nationalism. It's not inevitable. Seeing that development also shows us nationalism is not inevitable. It is not, certain peoples aren't predestined to be nationalists. And it wasn't something that's natural. It's something that's constructed, politically, socially. So I want that to be really reinforced for you guys. So you have somebody actually, Robert Kaplan. He wrote a number of books. One is The Coming Anarchy. It was actually off of a 1994 Atlantic magazine piece that he wrote, and he basically said, the coming wars are going to be based, are going to be kind of smaller, inside of nations. They're going to be based on things like resources, and he was right about these things. But he also kind of focused more on these ethnic conflicts, and he wrote this other book called Balkan Ghosts, which was very influential as well. And so his argument was like a primordialist argument, and he actually used the phrase ancient ethnic hatred. He basically said, and it was kind of used as by politicians who didn't really want to do anything in the Balkans, didn't want to intervene. So they said, you know what, these people have these ancient ethnic hatreds. We can't do anything about it. They're just wild fighters, and what can we do? They have this history, this ancestry. We can't change that, right? Again, using that for political, to justify political inaction, right? That we can't stop them, they're just crazy like that, and they've been like that for a long time, right? So which is totally not true, by the way. So I do not ascribe to that rendering of political affairs. It's too easy. It's an easy cop-out. It's actually a racist one. But, be wary when you see that type of language, because it is used often. Actually, it's intriguing. You have this guy called Herder in the 1800s. And he was a German linguist, and he argued that different languages make you think differently, and which is true to an extent. But then he carried it further, and it was kind of used as, again, this kind of biological, like certain nations therefore are better than others, etc., because of their, some traditions are better than others, etc. So keep in mind these different things. Instrumentalist. This is the idea that ethnicity is organized as a means to a particular ends. So it's building on pre-existing kinship, religious, social ties, and used, manipulated towards a political end. And so, it talks about how ethnicity and nationalism are modern phenomena. And I want you guys to be clear about that as well. That's why Hobsbawm's there too. It's modern phenomena. Nations may have pre-modern origins. They may have traditions that are pre-modern. But the construction, or this is going into constructionism, actually, constructivism, but anyways, ethnicity and nationalism are modern phenomena. And also this idea that nationalism is often based on historically flawed interpretations, right? So using history to justify your ends, right? Any examples you guys can think of with that? using history, manipulating historical occurrences. Yep.
There was an article recently that happened to one of my classes, and the fellow was arguing that Stephen Harper is like cutting funding to certain areas of like history and like culture and stuff like that, and also naming streets after like Ethan Baker and stuff like that. Even though those prime ministers in the writer's opinion were
That's a good point. So like the cutting of arts funding, for example, by Stephen Harper, and it could be any, like all prime ministers, all presidents do this. Actually, what's a really good example of this is how the government promoted the War of 1812, right? So the War of 1812, yes, go ahead.
So actually, I went to when I was in Niagara a few years ago when it was like the anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
They had this big video play all the time on the TV and the movie theaters. It's like, in 1812, the United States invaded us. We won. And it has like, this big Canadian banner that comes up and it shows.
Yes.
It shows like the all like the red coats guys firing at the Americans. Only the Americans were shot. None anybody else. And then it shows like the White House burning.
Yes, it was a great victory, right? We actually burned the White House, which most Americans, I don't think Americans would believe you if actually you told them that. Yes, you had your hand up too? No?
Oh, just another example.
Oh, another, okay, so 1812, absolutely. Huge, you guys, you're gonna know all the places I visit now. Upper Canada Village, also, anybody been there recently? Yeah? No, you don't wanna admit it? It's great, I love that, I actually love that place. But they have a little train ride, if you wanna get on with all the toddlers. It drives you past these screens, and it was a lot of funding went into this. The government consciously funded it, and you had support from different corporate sponsors too. And it, the little videos about the reenactment and the statues and what have you. And yes, portraying it as this patriotic war for Canadians, which wasn't actually how it was fought. So, it's very intriguing that. Canada wasn't really even a country then. So, that happened in 1867. So reinterpretation of it, and the War Museum also had a whole section on that as well, right? Yes, another example.
With Nazi Germany and the portrayal of the Jews, with their role in World War I,
Mm.
the Jewish people supposedly lost the war for Germany.
I think we can always, anything bad, we can always use Hitler and Nazi Germany. But you're absolutely right. Huge manipulating of history. Hitler actually, his architect, Albert Speer, was a pretty intriguing fellow. So Hitler was very big on using Romanesque architecture to reinforce this idea that they're the Aryan race, their descendants, etc. But the use of architecture, actually there's an interesting documentary called The Architecture of Doom that's all about Speer, Hitler, architecture, how we use that. So absolutely. And you can actually even think of that in terms of instrumentalists and manipulating history, architecture, monuments, right? What these monuments are saying they're portraying and what actually happened when they're, with what they had portrayed, right? So always interesting, yeah.
In the vein of that, were Ahmadinejad's claims about the Jewish people and
Oh, he was just crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the former prime minister of, former president of Iran, Ahmadinejad. Excellent examples. Constructivists, again, this is kind of like Anderson and the Imagined Community, that they're socially constructed. And so those are some different perspectives on it. And it's intriguing. There's these scholars, McGarry and O'Leary, they talk about how to deal with ethnic conflict, and they argue there's kind of three ways. You can eliminate difference, manage difference, or tolerate difference, or manage difference, right? And I thought that was kind of an intriguing typology. So they say eliminate difference, of course, that's genocide, ethnic cleansing, population transfers, or secession, or assimilation, right? So these are some of the ways that differences are eliminated, and you can think of all number of examples. Managing or tolerating difference, so this is like cohabitation, consociationalism, which is a way of structuring your government, basically consociationalism. They have it in Europe and in other places as well in some countries, where your government is structured where you have representatives. So in a parliament, for example, it's required that you have a certain number of representatives from a certain ethnic group. And there's certain like judge seats for certain ethnic groups, etc. So that type of thing. Or managing the difference. You can have arbitration, federalization. You can have democracy, or you can have authoritarian control. Sometimes that's used for it too. Ethnicity versus race. Yes. So. We talked about these constructivists already. What's intriguing is the idea of a group creating a belief. So you have someone like Weber, who talks about Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. Actually, anybody speak German here? Nobody. Okay. So Gemeinschaft is community, and Gesellschaft is society. And this idea that they're socially constructed, right? So, community, society, do they pre-exist ties? Are they created from ties? So, these are some things to think about. The legacy of apartheid. Yes. And so, yes, this kind of perception of race, and we talked about ethnicity and race already. So basically, race is that kind of biological determinism, this idea of distinctiveness solely on biological grounds, which does not exist. What is the difference? There's not even a difference between different races genetically, really. But what is it like? How far are humans from apes? What is it? 2%? So really? What is it? 2%. Okay. See, look at that. Not to burst anyone's bubble, but yeah, little difference. Apartheid. Perfect example of a society or a polity where they tried to use race, or they did actually. We'll talk more about that later.
Today, all South African citizens live in a democratic society and have equal rights. However, for most of the 20th century, a political system that came to be known as apartheid assigned privileges and enforced laws based on race, keeping white South Africans separate from non-white South Africans. Black South Africans have lived with people of European descent since Dutch settlers began moving into the country in the 1600s. But white South Africans wanted to control the country. Beginning in the early 1900s, the government passed laws that established the legal segregation of racial groups, known as apartheid. Apartheid laws provided white South Africans with higher wages for the same jobs. These laws also evicted black South Africans from their land and made it illegal for black South Africans to travel anywhere without passes. Other laws prevented black South Africans from voting in elections and forced them to live on crowded reserves called Bantuistans, which were located in arid, infertile areas. Without the ability to farm successfully, black South Africans became dependent on white South Africans in order to provide for themselves and their families. Many had to give up farming